Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Season 3 of the Common Time podcast. We're so glad to have you here to continue bringing our conversations, insights, and inspiration for music educators everywhere.
Each week, we'll highlight voices from across the music world and share ideas that you can bring directly into your classroom and to your ensembles. And now, let's turn to our guest. Our guest today is Michael Daugherty. Welcome, Michael.
Glad to be here.
So Michael is a 6-time Grammy Award Winning composer and one of the most commissioned, performed, and recorded composers on the American concert music scene today. We're really excited to have him with us. John, why don't you get us started?
Thanks, David. Hi, Michael. Always good to see you. So I'm just going to dive right in by asking, every composer develops a unique voice. So what experiences or influences have shaped your own compositional style?
Well, I think collaboration has always been something that has entered into all my music. Going back to when I was a kid, I had a rock band called the Soul Company. I played piano with the concert choir. I was played in jazz groups and so forth. Also, teaching is a collaboration. When I have a private student teaching composition, I view it not that I'm going to teach them something, but it's a collaboration between two people. And I think over the years, I've enjoyed working with conductors. And one of the things I like about wind ensemble music is the fantastic conductors I've met over the years, both at the middle school, high school, and college level. Those conductors always seem to want, input, collaboration, and that's something that has marked my music. And so when I'm writing, I'm thinking about the conductor, I'm thinking about the performers. And I think collaboration has been a very important part of my thinking.
Yeah, I love that you're in a rock band. So how long were you in the rock band?
Well, let's see, I was in the Soul Company. That was, high school. So for like 3 or 4 years. And I also was in drum and bugle corps.
Really?
I was in a corps called the Grenadiers, and then they folded, and then the Emerald Knights in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
I didn't know that.
I remember marching against the Cavaliers. And I remember that the Emerald Knights, with a score of 33.5, the Emerald Knights, and then with a score of 99.2, the Cavaliers. And one of the most exciting things I can remember is when the Cavaliers played a work I composed called Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we actually went to the performance in Chicago. This is like 20-some years ago. But I think they won the DCI that year or tied for the
DCI.
DCI.
2000. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I guess that show is quite well known. I remember as they were marching past the stands, I turned to a guy next to me and said, "Yeah, I wrote the music they were playing." He goes, "Yeah, and I'm president of the United States." So I'll never forget that. But no,
that is funny.
But drum corps is something I tend to have big endings, and I think every drum corps piece, the horns go in a straight line and come blasting down. So that's always been something has influenced my music, probably.
Right. Yeah. I love that connection.
Mhm.
So a lot of your music draws inspiration from American cultural figures, Rosa Parks, Jackie Onassis, so forth, or even, pop film and so forth. So I'm curious,
Mhm.
how do you choose the subjects that end up becoming the heart of your works?
Well, you can't see my studio, but I have a huge antique store in my studio of everything from a Superman lunchbox to Star Trek paraphernalia to autographs of famous composers and Hollywood film stars. And everything I write is inspired by things that I have connected to or like. So growing up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s as a young composer, probably many of the figures I picked have come from that time period. But I was always a big fan of Charles Ives and Aaron Copland, Bernstein. So we're composers whose music reflected time they're in. And I think that's what we see with all great music, is that the music reflects the time that they're in, whether it's, Vienna in 1820 or America in 1950, in the 50s. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I relate to, and, music connecting to the time that you're living in.
So then, Michael, speaking of that, and many people, I would argue, would characterize your music as both deeply accessible but richly complex. So how do you approach balancing the sophistication for the musicians, but also a connection to the audience?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. complexity, what is complex? I think that, ironically, I studied with many of the most well-known avant-garde 20th century composers, from Giorgi Ligeti to Pierre Boulez, and these sorts of composers that wrote very complex abstract music. But I think narrative is something that I've always connected with, and it's something that I think the audience could connect with too. So, a recent piece I wrote, the Adventures of Jesse Owens, for example, or I just wrote a piece called Dreams of Dali, as in Salvador Dali, or another piece about Andy Warhol and so forth. So, picking subject matters that I relate to, but also often I think other listeners can as well. So I think that's one way. But I think as far as the complexity, I do write with a lot of counterpoint, and I've always thought it's important that scores have a lot of detail and interest in the score itself. So the narrative is just one layer of the polyphony, so to speak. But on top of that, there has to be the music too. And I think, being accessible, I don't know, I grew up in Iowa. I've always thought it's important to be very matter of fact and not to beat around the bush about things. But I think you can be abstract to a certain degree, and I think my music is like that too. I mean, it's concert music. It doesn't need a visual. It doesn't need something else. It doesn't need dance to go with it. It actually is made to be a self-sustaining thing, which means that my music has to be the visuals, the dialogue, the sound effect has to be everything in a sense. So the complexity comes from putting all those things together.
I'm just interesting. I want to jump back for just a second. I was thinking about the pop culture and the different things. So I think the first time I heard your music was the Metropolis Symphony. And I didn't even, at the time I was very young, and I wasn't even thinking in terms of band or orchestra or anything. I just saw the cover art, which was really appealing to me. Like, in fact, almost all of your pieces have really unique cover art and so forth. But was that piece the sort of the big breakout piece for you that kind of changed everything, or was there something different? I'm just curious about your perspective of, I remember seeing that and thinking like, this is the greatest thing ever. And then what happened next was now we have, a huge body of work from you. So I'm just curious, was that when it started?
I have a comic book right here, actually. So
okay,
back and I'll grab it. Yeah. So when I was a kid, you see here an original Superman comic book from the 1950s.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I used to read these comic books, and then I started to collect them, and and really the Superman myth is a mythology, right? So it really lent itself to like a narrative story. So we move through Lex to Krypton, Lex his foe, right, to Krypton, to Mxyzptlk, who's the imp from the fifth dimension. That's the guy right there who causes havoc, and of course Lois Lane, and then the death of Superman, Red Cape Tango, which was made into a band piece.
Right.
The last movement, yeah. And I was very lucky because that was recorded by several orchestras, and most recently this was the Metropolis Symphony, recording by Nashville, the one that won 3 Grammys. And anyway, so that's something that tied into my childhood, and it seemed to resonate with people.
Yeah, it absolutely has. And you mentioned the band just a moment ago, that movement was written. So you've written really for a wide range of ensembles now: band, orchestra, chamber music, soloists, and so forth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what draws you to the writing for the wind band in particular? I'm curious. And what opportunities does that give you that the other mediums don't?
Well, I think that in generally the orchestra world is a professional world. So you're dealing with constraints of rehearsal time and so forth. It's hard to do recordings because of union rules and so forth. So I think with wind ensemble music, it's a much freer environment, much more rehearsal time. You can easily record the groups and get your music, out there, posted now on YouTube and so forth, which with orchestra is very hard to do. So I think the accessibility of wind ensemble for composers is attractive. But also when I was a kid, I remember I remember that Frederick Fennell came to Coe College once, and he conducted, Sousa marches, and that was my thinking of what band music was at the time. And then when I came to Michigan, I met Bob Reynolds, who was interested in commissioning composers who hadn't written for band, and he didn't want band pieces. And I think um, that was a time where the boundaries were being pushed, and composers were started to write for band music. And I've always, when I write, I'm really writing when I'm writing band, I'm really writing for orchestra, but for band. And when I'm writing for orchestra, I'm really thinking of band writing for. So I'm kind of switching the way
Interesting.
we think. Like my pieces
Yeah.
really don't sound like band pieces in a sense, because I think I write in a more orchestral way. Yeah.
I would agree with that completely. I mean, and I have told you this before, but I every honor band I do, every all state band I do, I always program a piece of yours because I think it's so well written all the time because it is complex but accessible. Um, it is so well thought through, which I don't think is always the case from composers in our field, right? Which is why I'm always fascinated whenever you put out a new piece. I can't wait to program it. So
Hmm.
I do look forward to the upcoming term where I can certainly look at some of your upcoming stuff coming out. But I do have a question about, or just to follow up about collaboration. You were talking about the collaborative process, which I think is such an important part of the artistic exchange. Are you able to kind of dive into this just a bit more about how to effectively uh, collaborate with a conductor composer collaboration or conductor composer
Mhm.
soloist or some
Hmm.
combination of that to help the final product be as outstanding as it can possibly be?
Sure. Well, so for those conductors out there, if you're thinking about commissioning a composer or whatever, one thing you could do is workshop the piece. So when I've worked with Bob Reynolds and also Michael Haithcock here in Michigan on a new piece, let's say 2 months before the premiere, we might do a reading session, read the piece down and record it, and I'll listen to it. Then I'll go back and perhaps make changes. I might make some cuts, some changes in the orchestration, and so forth. So that's one thing you can do. Or I've written a new piece called Cadillac Ranch with Texas Tech is going to premiere with Sarah McCoyne is conducting. So I'm going to go. I'll be there at the first rehearsal Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They're going to do a recording session, concert Sunday. So in other words, having the composer there, and I will be at every rehearsal. And then the first one, I listen to it. I might make some adjustments and so forth. So it's important to record the rehearsal. The composer can listen to it, come back the next day. Measure 46 trumpets. Let's put in straight mutes and so forth. So then you have changes you want or something, or cut these 4 bars or whatever. So that's the collaborative process. I think having the composer there and then having them a chance to listen to the piece and giving enough time for some changes to be made, because usually there's always something that comes up that
Yeah.
that you need to change. So I think that's how the collaboration works. Also, the conductor is very clear. This is the instrumentation I need. This is the length I want, and so forth. And to maybe once in a while, if the conductor wants, you could send the score like, here's where I am, and they can listen to it. So just having feedback and being in touch with the conductor and with the composer, as opposed to the composer just showing up for the world premiere. You know,
Right.
so it's better if you build into the package that they are there for a number of rehearsals, so that there can be there can be some feedback if needed, and changes if needed.
I remember when we workshopped your Jesse Owens piece because I was conducting that during that time, and I remember you in the room going, "Trumpets, why don't we articulate it this way instead, so that it could be more?" And I was like, "Wow!" Watching this creative process happen in real time, I thought was absolutely fascinating.
And
You
it's also fun for the students too,
Absolutely,
Yeah.
to see and hear the process.
Yeah.
and
That's what
then
I was about to mention. That student experience has got to be pretty
it's pretty cool.
cool as well for them to have you in
Hmm.
the room, but also to see that happening in life, like real
Hmm.
life time. Like, no, this is what I really want to hear like you're processing that and they get to see it happen, which is like the genius at work and them getting to see that.
Well, yeah, and it could also help to have a MIDI version. So I use Sibelius, and for my sounds, I use a program called Note Performer, which is very good and doesn't cost too much actually. And I will send a MIDI version to the conductor in MP3, which then they can send to the band and they can hear it to get kind of a mock-up of what the piece sounds like. And this is also very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Bringing the students into it, I think, is just it's just great for our listeners to understand that composers enjoy that process often, being in the room and speaking with them and having those conversations and collaborating. So, along that same kind of thought, as someone who has music that is played for both students and professional ensembles, do you think differently, or do you work differently in terms of challenge when we're talking about inspiring performances at different levels? Do you think different about a
Yeah.
piece for high school versus professional?
Well, that's interesting. I know there's in band music, there's a grade system, which I've never been a fan of personally. I don't really think, oh, this is grade 2 or this is grade 4. I don't really think that way, frankly. So I wrote a piece actually for this summer called Donus Nobis Pacem, which is right there, and that's a new one. But it's probably a grade 4 piece, but I wasn't thinking, that I'm going to write an easy piece. So every piece I write, I want it to be something that I'll be proud of to hear no matter who plays it. So I think that the level of sophistication is always the same as I'm writing. So, yeah.
Do you write any for younger students?
Well, the Donus Nobis Pacem is a piece of younger...
For younger bands?
It was commissioned by Glenn Edsett, the late Glenn Edsett, for Aspire consortium he put together with the idea of writing pieces that could be played by, high school bands and bands. So it's funny. So when my daughter was in middle school, I wrote a piece called Alligator Alley for the middle school here in Ann Arbor, Slauson Middle School. And it's in 5/4 time. And I didn't realize that actually it's very rare to have a piece in 5/4 time, especially for that age group.
Right.
But they actually were able to play it fine, but it's also played by high schools and also by at the college level too. So, but it was written for middle school and they could actually play it. So
yeah, that's a great piece. I've used it several times on honor band performances. Kids always love it.
I realized only recently what's really unusual, that's in 5/4 time. You almost never see a piece.
See it
at high school or middle school in 5/4 time.
The landscape of music education and performance is evolving rapidly just because of the times that all of us are currently living in. So then where do you see a role of contemporary composers, especially in our medium, heading in the upcoming decade or two? Like, where's this thing going?
Yeah. Well, it's really hard to forecast where things are going as far as music. And I know that's a question that's asked of composers often. But I'm very optimistic. I think that music survives no matter what, in all the wars of the past or the economic issues or problems, music somehow continues to thrive. I think, it's just part of our zeitgeist. And I think that it's something that everybody needs. Certainly in Texas, it's not an issue. When I go to Texas and hear those bands play down there, I'm thinking, oh my goodness. So I think music is alive and well, but yeah, I'm sure there'll be some adjustments made. I know that many composers now are looking at social, issues to be part of their music, which is fine. But I think I'm optimistic about the future of music. I think, and it's important that composers continue to write. My only red flag would be for composers not to write too many pieces too quickly. Like writing 3 or 4 pieces a year, that's a bit of a stretch. I usually write one piece maybe every 2 years or one piece a year at the most. So I think it's good to make sure you take time so that each piece is unique and has some depth to it.
Right.
That's great advice.
It's interesting that you say that, because I know there are composers that put out a lot of music rather quickly. Do you think that affects the the depth of what that music will be in the future? Like, will it stay around? Will it stick?
I know it's interesting. If you look at the history of film actors, and you'll see like a particular actor, like a Harrison Ford, might be known for like 5 or 6 movies, but they made maybe like 60 movies, and a lot of them, like I've never heard of that film, right? So, I think that there's 2 approaches. One, you just churn out a lot of stuff and you see what sticks to the wall, so to speak. Um, I think it's up to the composer to know they get that they have given his or her best effort. I think that's important. If you feel inside, yes, I haven't compromised, I've written the best piece I possibly can, then I think it's okay to release it. But I think if you have doubts about it, or I got this deadline, I just got to finish it, I don't know. I think that probably one won't be as satisfied with the result.
Yeah, gotcha.
So, can I ask, just as a follow up, and I've always been curious as to the perspective that you have. Um, so, I think the hardest part of our job as conductors is choosing quality repertoire. What is a good piece to you? What makes a really good piece of music? I know
Uh,
it's a tough one,
yeah,
but here we are.
sure. Well, I think I'm attracted to music when there's a particular idea that is obvious and then is developed. I've always, been fascinated by, Bach, how he was able to write those fugues and inventions and so forth. And then to develop, or Gustav Mahler was amazing at, you know, taking, writing these half an hour movements basing off two or three tunes, or, or like a Miles Davis, how he was able to come up with these great tunes or melodies, or John Coltrane or so forth, and then develop those ideas. So I think developing is important, and it's also good to take some risks occasionally, and to maybe write a piece that is not a commission, just to write a piece that's something that you want to write. I think that can be important as well.
Do you ever write something and be like, crumple? Nope.
Sometimes I'm writing a piece and it turns out that's not the piece I was writing. I was really composing a different work, but I tend to work pretty much on one piece at one time. I don't write 2 or 3 things at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to come up with the concept and the title first, so I know what it's going to be about. So that's important for me, so I know what it is I'm trying to say.
Yeah, gotcha. I'm curious, for our young composers or educators that are listening, do you have advice or something you could share about how they can bring new music to life and make it meaningful for the performers and audiences? Like, what advice would you have?
Well, I think going to live performances is really important. If you can play in the ensemble, that's even better. At least the composers who've grown up playing like in a band in high school, or playing an instrument in the orchestra. I mean, many conductors in orchestra are people who've come from, who played the violin, for example. And many conductors are people who, played the clarinet or the trumpet or whatever in the bands. So, Sean, what was your instrument?
I'm a tuba player.
Oh, tuba. Oh, okay. And
Yes, sir.
okay, trumpet. Yeah. So anyway, so if you play in the ensemble, I think that really helps. But if you're a composer who didn't, like I played piano, so I never played in in band or orchestra. But I think going to live concerts, I still do it now, because it's one thing to be working on your computer with MIDI, but it's different hearing live instruments and just seeing what works acoustically, because often what works on your computer for balances will not work live. So you have to go back and forth. But again, I just think going to as many live concerts as you can. Also, what's great about YouTube, many scores are up there. So you can like turn on YouTube and look up any piece you want, and the music's there. And so you can like listen with the score following by. That's pretty amazing. So, that's also a very good tool as well.
Yeah, I love it. Are you working on anything currently? Have anything big coming up?
I wrote a piece called Van Vechten Variations, based on the photography of Carl Van Vechten, who took famous portraits of artists of the Harlem Renaissance in the 1930s. So that's being premiered. It's a 30-minute solo piano piece being premiered at Carnegie Hall in a couple weeks, actually.
That's awesome.
great.
Congrats.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I just mentioned the Cadillac Ranch. That's a band piece being done at Texas Tech. And a piece I wrote last year, which the University of North Texas is doing, Dreams of Dali, the artist. And they're doing that the following week. And I think they're playing in Midwest. They're playing one of the movements, I believe. So, and then I'm writing a Buddy Holly piece called Buddy Holly guitar, called Last Dance at the Surf. And that'll be for the Lone Star Wind Symphony. That'll be so I'm busy at the moment, yes.
Yeah.
Like it.
Lots of projects in Texas.
It's always Texas. Yeah, Texas is
So,
always
Michael,
a lot of action in Texas.
I'm sorry?
There's always a lot are action in Texas. It seems.
Indeed. So Michael, this has just been a fascinating conversation. Your insights are always wonderful to hear. So now that we've come to the end of our formal questions, we have 3 that we ask all of our guests, and I'll take the first one. So do you have a soapbox topic about anything to share with our listeners?
I guess my wish is that we can just keep the dialogue open between people. And I think that music is one of the common denominators. I mean, sports is that. And I think music is one of those things where you can have people who have different belief systems can come together and can create something that's productive. So, hopefully divisive politics won't get into sports where people start like losing a game. They say, wait, the game was rigged. We're not going to accept, we actually won the game. So that hasn't happened in sports yet. You lose the game, you shake hands. Okay, that's how it is. And in music, I think too that you can bring different kinds of people together with different belief systems, but you can produce something that's very positive. So
that's absolutely true. Michael, are there any books or a singular book that has inspired your journey? Doesn't have to be musical, just books that you would share that, hey, this is something you should pay attention to.
Well, I wish I had more time to read books. But when I was a kid, Ernest Hemingway, I read many of his books, and I actually wrote a cello concerto called Tales of Hemingway. So I've always been a fan of American writing, Ernest Hemingway and others, but I don't really have time, a lot of time to read. Probably really films have informed me more. There's certain movies like that come on, like The Wizard of Oz or The Godfather or The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. Certain films that every time they come on, I just have to watch those films. And I'm looking at the visuals. I'm listening to how the music, the editing, the camera work, and all that sort of thing. So I think I'm a visual person more, and I think films have really shaped my way of thinking quite a bit.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I would love to have you write a piece that is based on the Godfather trilogy. I would love that. I'll start working out.
Well, there's some pretty good tunes in there.
There are some really good tunes.
Some really good music in that. So then, Michael, for a final question that we ask everybody, and arguably the most important, what is your favorite time signature?
That's interesting. I tend to like a time signature like 4/4/3/4 or 3/4/4/4. So instead of just a 4/4 steady groove, I like to have mixed meters. So I tend to do I'm thinking a lot of like 4/4/3/4 kind of thing, or instead of 7/4, I'll break it up. But I think that it gives a sense of rhythmic drive, but at the same time, the downbeat can change slightly. Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. 4/4 plus 3/4.
Yeah, another thing I've done in a lot of my pieces, going all the way back to Desi, is if I'm in 3/4, I'll do bum ba 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 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Right.
But sometimes it's a 4 ba 1 2 3 4 ba 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 ba. And you come back to 1.
You finally get back to 1. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I remember. Sorry, I was just saying, going off of that, I was conducting Niagara Falls actually with a pioneer band at Carnegie Hall a couple of years ago, And man, I was having to think in my head, like going, don't even subdivision, even subdivision. So like, just because it is so complex, yet it's just, I just think it is geniusly written. It's just, anyway, just like, but there are times going through your music that I've had to think as hard as like Stravinsky or other complex music going
Yeah.
but then it just feels right, but you got to be able to make sure that everything works. It's just excellent.
The two most difficult pieces I've conducted were Mountains Rising Nowhere and Bells for Stokowski. And
Such a
Bells,
great
I
piece.
love that piece, but you have to really be paying attention to what's coming up in the meter change, the tempo change.
Mhm.
I really had to dig into that score, basically memorize it, because it
Hmm.
changes it changes quickly. You don't have time to turn the page and be like, oh, nope.
No.
It really was that. But I love that piece. You mentioned earlier just a Bach and that whole tying together the bells in that piece with the idea of fugue, which you mentioned earlier, is something that you were really interested in. It was just so geniusly weaved together. Like I really love that piece. And it has a big ending too, like you talked about earlier. So
Yeah, I like those. I like those big endings. Although I'm sorry, occasionally I do have a soft ending. So, but
is there one piece that you've written that's your favorite?
well, there's so many pieces now over the last 40 some years that I've written, but usually the piece I'm hearing at that time, I think I wrote that.
That's great.
But
So
there's certain pieces. It's also usually as a composer, you're known for maybe one piece after you're gone. Usually it's like one piece you're known for. For Lincolnshire Posey for
yeah, for Granger.
For
Yeah.
Stranger, yeah.
Percy Granger. I mean, that's basically the piece he's known for, right? You're known for kind of one piece. But a couple of pieces, Niagara Falls, Belster Stokowski, those will probably be around. And I wrote a new one called Pasquale in Primary Colors. I think that's one of my best pieces, actually. And that's starting to make the rounds. And The Adventures of Jesse Owens, I think that's a piece that might
It's a
stick around
great piece of music. Yes.
quite a bit. So,
I've
but
not heard that one, so I'm looking forward to hearing
you
it.
never, yeah. I mean, you never know what's going to stick, so to speak.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I've had a great ride. I've worked with so many great conductors. I won't mention them because I'll forget somebody. But I've worked with so many great conductors over the years, and many of them are friends. And it's just I love working in the wind world, and and it's either been middle school or high school or college or whatever. It's just been a great ride, and I look forward to getting a couple more pieces in over the years. And we talked about doing something. I'm going to be retiring from the University of Michigan from teaching soon. We talked about doing something with the marching band.
I am
Yes.
so
let's
excited. We
do it.
have to make this work. I am working hard behind the scenes to have it happen, Michael.
Okay, so
I
That would
look
be
forward to it.
fantastic. Absolutely. So,
Michael, thank you so
Michael,
much for your time today.
yeah, absolutely. We so appreciate you being with us. Absolutely. That's it for today's episode of the Common Time Podcast.
And thank you for spending time with us. We hope that today's conversation will give you something useful to take back to your students and your program.
And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribed so you don't miss what's coming up. And if you know another director who might benefit from this, please share it with them.
Also, don't forget, you're able to nominate a music educator for our Standing Ovation program. The link to submit is in the show notes below.
Thanks again for joining us on the Common Time Podcast. As always, keep making music and keep making a difference.